Welcome. I hope that term hasn't seemed trite to you because I sincerely mean it. And I'm sorry, my emotions are clear up in my eyes today. Anyway, I want to especially welcome you this morning to our seminar. The only word that came to me to introduce this seminar was the word gratitude. We have gratitude for all you wonderful people who joined us on this interesting voyage of Elder Quest this year on the internet, on Zoom. It's amazing how we elderly people can learn new things, isn't it? So many of you are now perfect in being able to zoom in and listen and speak, and it's amazing how you got from the very first semester to the second, and how we've become friends, haven't we, on Zoom? But we're excited to announce that 99% sure that we're going to be able to meet here at the center starting in September 13th. Make sure that's on your calendar. You'll be getting a newsletter before that. But anyway, let me express gratitude to you again for joining us. I want to express gratitude to our teachers. You all know that they teach without any compensation, only your thanks. And they all are so excited to come back. It was so cute. Bruce said he's graduating. Yes, he's graduating. He's retiring from BYU. And he says, I didn't know what I was going to do. And now I've got Elder Quest, so I can keep on teaching. He was so excited with sharing things with us. And so we have new topics for us this fall and things like that. And then gratitude for the board. You see me every day and you see Margine and Gerhardt, and there's no way we could have even functioned without Gerhardt and Margine. You could have functioned without me because somebody else could have stood here and done this, but we couldn't have functioned without those two. And the board, there's 16 of us, and they have been so wonderful. They give of their time, they give of their talents, they give of their money, they really, really help. And so, like I say, my heart is full of gratitude this morning. So thanks again for joining us, and we hope you'll enjoy our presentations today with the many people that are involved, and stay with us. And I hope you have a wonderful virtual luncheon after. I promise next year we'll have a luncheon together. Again, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Good morning. I know it's spring outside, even though it's snowing. I just know it's spring. But it's our spring seminar, and it's our scholarship seminar. And I'm very excited to be here with you today because I'm the scholarship chairperson. And my committee has worked very hard this year, as have all the committees of Elder Quest. And it's wonderful to be with you virtually. Last year, we couldn't even have this virtually. So we've come a long ways in a year. And I'm excited to talk to you about, first of all, our Shakespeare Simon Fest. That is on July 28th to the 31st. This trip is a go. We have enough people to do the trip. We bought the theater tickets last Friday. Now, if you haven't joined already, you still can, and we can still buy you theater tickets. And at this point, we think we can get you seats fairly close to ours, but you need to join right away. We're so excited for this trip because, of course, last year it was canceled, but this year it's a go. We're going to start with Pirates of Penzance. Everybody loves Pirates of Penzance. And if you haven't seen it, you're in for a treat because it's pirates singing and dancing and the girls that they conquer and the fathers that become upset. And it's a wonderful, wonderful show. You will love it. It's comedy at its best. It's music at its best. And then you have the choice of 3 other shows. You can choose Ragtime, which is a marvelous musical, The Comedy of Errors, which is funny, or Bakersville. If you like Sherlock Holmes, you're going to love this spoof on Sherlock Holmes. Then you have a choice of Cymbeline, a Shakespeare play, or Looking Over the President's Shoulder. The butler for the President of the United States, starting in about 1932, was a Black man who was the son of a slave. And he served 4 presidents in a row. And this is his story, looking over those presidents' shoulders, starting with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. A wonderful, wonderful book. If you haven't read it, you may want to read the book. Then you have a choice of Pericles, again, a very fun show from Shakespeare, Comedy of Terrors, a spoof on Comedy of Errors, or Daddy Longlegs. It was a movie with Fred Astaire, and you may remember it. Here again, we have songs and dancing. And last of all, Death Trap, which I decided we all had to see because I love Death Trap. If you love murder mysteries, this one is so well constructed. I've directed it. I saw it on Broadway. It ran for 6 years, which is amazing for a straight show. And it ran with the original cast. That's also amazing. But Death Trap is one of the best murder mysteries ever written. You don't want to miss it. Then besides that, we just have a lot of fun. We go shopping. We furnish you 3 breakfasts, 1 lunch, 3 dinners. We make sure you eat. We want you to be healthy and happy and able to go. You have a choice of going to Kolob Canyon. If you prefer to sleep in, sleep in. If you want to swim, swim. If you want to shop, shop. If you want to go see Kolob Canyon, come with us. And then we're taking everybody to Cathedral State Park in Nevada. This is magnificent, and I don't think most of you have seen it. And so off we go to Cathedral State Park. So get your money into us, call us. Look at Carla's going to be showing you, or Gerhard's going to be showing you our bucket list trips, which is our website. Come join. You're not too late. You can still go. You can join the rest of us that are now on that bus and now have tickets. Don't be left home.
Hello, I'm Carla, and I work with Joan at Travel Passport. I wanted to talk about the Rhine River Cruise, and I've asked Gerhard to put up our website just because there's so much information on this website so that you can have a chance to write it down, go and look, because there's no way for us to tell you everything that's on the Rhine River Cruise especially. We are going to be going into Basel, Switzerland. We will be in Strasbourg, France. We will be in Germany. We will be in the Netherlands. And it is an amazing cruise for anyone who has ever cruised down the Middle Rhine with castles on both sides of the cliffs as you go down, and hearing the stories and the history of them. It is wonderful. There's just no way to say how great this cruise is. And I know that you have studied this year the Rhine River and the history of this area. It is phenomenal. You're going to go into the Black Forest, which is, it was one of the thrills of my life, actually, to go into the Black Forest and see it, because I'd heard about it for a long, long time and I'd always wanted to see it. You will have the chance to go to Cologne, to go to the cathedral there. Amazing. You will be going into Heidelberg, which is a wonderful university town, and so much history, so many things to see and choose to do. There's just so much we want you to experience. You can come in early if you want. We're doing this with Viking River Cruises, and they are letting people come in up to 30 days prior to the cruise and extend up to 30 days after the cruise for the airfare of $9.99. And that's round trip out of Salt Lake City. That is good now through April 30th. So I wanted you to be aware of that. We would love to have all of you come. We just want to make sure you go onto the website. The least expensive staterooms are $2,574 per person, and then you would have that $1,000 airfare on top of that. But we would just love to share this with you. It is going to be so much fun, and this is next August, so August 6th through 13th, 2022. We will be flying in one day early into Basel, Switzerland, and then we will get on the ship the next day. So you can choose to do that, go in earlier. There are lots of pre and post trips that you can do through Viking that are on the website. So come join us. It's going to be wonderful.
Thank you, Carla. Now I have another hat. I'm your travel person along with Carla. I'm also your scholarship chairperson. And that's why we're here today, because this is our scholarship seminar. I get very emotional when I talk about the scholarships. I'm like Cheryl. She gets emotional when she thanks you and is so grateful for all of you, as I am. But I get very emotional when I talk about our scholarships because it was a hard fought battle. I thought back in 2002 that we should be more than just people that went to classes and luncheons. That was great because we got to make new friends, but we needed a purpose. Most of us have had education beyond high school. And we believed as a group that we should help those struggling students that were older, but coming back to college and help them with scholarships so that they would be able to continue their education. And so we established the Elder Quest Scholarship for students who weren't freshmen out of high school, but instead were coming back because their lives had changed. For instance, Geneva closed and all those people lost their jobs. They had to all find new careers. People get divorced. They have spouses die. Many things happen to us in our lives. And so when that happens, sometimes we need to change the course of our lives completely. And we set up this scholarship to help people just like that. We had to have $30,000 to endow this. Now we had 105 members and we had to raise $30,000. How would you have felt? This group felt wonderful. They said we can do it. They decided we'd have auctions. And so they donated yard row figurines and people made quilts and Little Giant donated ladders to us. And all kinds of wonderful things came in. And we had an auctioneer there and we started to raise money, and raise money we did. And eventually we reached that goal and there we were. We could now give scholarships, and it's 5 years later, it's 2007, we gave our first scholarships. Since then, you have funded 112 students. Do you realize how many lives you changed? You changed those people's lives, but you changed their families' lives. You changed their children's lives. You made them more successful, and you did that. And that's why we have the Elder Quest Scholarship. The thing that's so great about this is when you donate to other scholarships, you don't know where your money goes. But I'm here to tell you that Elder Quest doesn't keep 1 penny of the money that you donate, nor does UVU. If you give $100, the students get your $100. Nobody keeps anything out of that. And then bonus time, you get to meet the people that got your scholarships. So they come in person and they thank you for those scholarships. So this is a win-win situation. And then to make it even better, every single cent that you donate up to $5,000, Elder Quest doubles. So if you give $100, Elder Quest gives another $100. And so if we raise 5,000, we've now got 10,000. So you can't lose with this, people. You should have all gotten a letter and you should have gotten a donation card. If you didn't get that, let me know. I'm in the phone book or I'm on email, whatever, find me and let me know. And we'll make sure that you get that donation card. We want you to donate. We want you to help people. We've scholarshiped 112 people. You have raised $236,852 since 2007. That's incredible. We're not a big organization, but we are an organization that cares. As we read the resumes, the scholarship committee reads the resumes of these students, we learn things that you can't even imagine. We had one young man who hitchhiked from Georgia to Orem to go to UVU because he needed every penny of money he had for scholarship, for his tuition. One student lived in Heber, and every Monday morning he packed a cool chest full of food, came to UVU, lived in his car for the week, stayed as much time as he could in the library when he wasn't in classes, and then Friday night went back to Heber to his wife and his 3 children, spent the weekend with them, and then started the week over again. We had another woman who was single, 25 years old. Her sister had been sent to prison for dealing drugs. And so she took over guardianship of her sister's 3 school-age children. She said, I'm a bank teller, but I can't possibly make enough there to raise these children. I've got to have a degree. And so she went back to college to get a degree so she could raise her sister's 3 children. Another woman that touched my heart, she talked about how she couldn't afford a warm coat in the winter, but if she walked really fast to catch the train, she could make it. She wouldn't freeze to death. And then she could get on the train and come to college. And so these are the people, these are just some of the people that you're giving money to. I ask you to dig deep. I ask you to give as much money as possible. Your money changes lives. It blesses people. You are angels, every single one of you. You're angels, and these people love you. You're going to hear today from 3 of our scholarship winners. And the first one is Jamie Holt. Now, she was supposed to speak to you in November, and we didn't know she was even here virtually, but she was. And so we missed her. And so she's speaking to you today to thank you for scholarshiping her. The second person you're going to hear is Monica English. You scholarshiped her in 2018 and 2019. So here they are to thank you and talk to you about their lives.
Thank you. Yeah, I joined in November, and I had my streaming. I'm still in school, so I had my streaming class going, and in the background, and then I had this going, and I just kept waiting for somebody to call on me. I thought, well, maybe next time. So here I am, and it's wonderful to see your smiling faces. I am a mother of 5, and we just dropped our oldest daughter off at the airport yesterday to serve her mission. And I can tell you, it's been, for those of you ladies out there who've had children, it's been a rough go. It really has. I started back to school in 2009 when I had 3 children and we were living in our own basement because we'd lost our business in the 2008 bubble that burst. And I was sitting in the basement pregnant with my 4th child and realized that I needed a little bit more stimulation than just toddlers and diapers and laundry and dishes. And so I signed up for school and I got the grants, and I worked my way through my associate's degree with high honors while raising baby number 3. And then I had baby number 4, and then I had baby number 5, all while living in the basement. All the kids were in one room, we were in the other room, and we lived in the basement so we wouldn't lose our home. So we rented out the upstairs and we lived in the basement. And it was tight, and I enjoyed having my children close. And as the children grew with me in school, they came to know the importance of education. They knew there was time to sit and study. They knew there was time to be quiet because mom had a class. I did most of it online. And I got my associate's degree. Then I thought maybe I'll go back for my bachelor's, but my husband had finished his schooling because he was out of a job. And he got a fairly okay job, but there wasn't really money for me to be in school. So I started applying for scholarships, which went fairly well. And then in 2017, I was serving as a secretary for the board of trustees for a charter school for my children, and I was also the stake young women's president. And hi, Terry. Terry's taking a picture. And and I contracted Lyme disease, and it went undiagnosed for over a year, and I had many physical ailments from it, with my heart, my tongue, actually, my joints, my brain, and I had to stop going to school because any kind of noise was too much for my brain to keep track of anything. My children had to learn to be very quiet because if I was reading something and they talked, I couldn't read anymore. It was a one-line kind of attention span, which is really hard as a mother of 5. It's really hard. And so during that time, I started writing stories when I couldn't do anything else, when I couldn't sleep because my body hurt, and when I couldn't pay attention to anything because noise or even vision was too much. I would lay in my bed with my laptop and I'd turn the screen off and I'd just start typing. I'd just start making things up. I'd start making up stories of some other place than being trapped in my own bed. And I just continued. I just kept doing it. And then I started reading the stories to my kids and they liked them. And so then I started writing more stories for my children and they liked those. And then I started feeling a little bit better and went back to school. I actually got a scholarship to go back to UVU because I was over 40 and they gave me some money to start on my bachelor's. And so in 2019, I went back to UVU. And I don't know if you guys know Peggy Payson, who's a counselor at the Women's Success Center, but she was literally an angel for me. She's still my friend. We still email back and forth, but she's the one who encouraged me to tell people that I write stories. And I was like, no, it's just for my kids. And she said, well, how many have you written? And I said, oh, I've written series of books. And so she wanted to read one. So I gave her one to read. And then I have another one for her to read. And anyway, long story short, this is my last semester at UVU. And this last year, getting ready for graduating and my daughter going on a mission and my husband's new job, I didn't think I was going to get any scholarships. I really didn't. I thought, well, maybe this semester I get a part-time job or something, stocking groceries at Days, I guess I could. And then I got this scholarship. And I was really, really grateful that people invested in moms who just had a desire to be an example for their children. My oldest daughter actually graduated high school with her associate's degree, and my second daughter is about to do the same next spring. Because education is important, not just for the monetary gain that it might someday provide, but because we're here to learn. And I've learned quite a bit by being in school and developing friendships and habits that have blessed my children's lives. So I also try to give back whenever I can. And I don't have any means to give back right now, but I do have talents. I have been given talents. I help with the English department Warp and Weave. So it's their literary journal. This is the cover I did last semester for them. I help with all the art. So any art that they need help with. Here's one from the semester before. Help lay that out and do it. I actually started my own anthology for people who like to write poetry, because I love to read poetry. And these were just collections of poems from students in the poetry classes at UVU. And so I made a book for them. And it's actually on Amazon. I mean, it's like $5, but just so that they could have their poems published, which is hard to do. Poems are hard. Here's my best friend from Colorado. I took all of her poems and I put them in a book, and we published it because that's what I can do. I helped with a national security journal as a source checker. That was interesting. I learned a lot about Taiwan. I've had my photography published in journals. This one's from Germany. I don't know, I believe in being a member of the community and giving back. I don't know how much time you guys give me to ramble on. I am a creative writer, so I can go on all day, if nobody needs a break. But I was going to read you my latest short story that was just published. If anybody wants to give me a thumbs up, it's really short. It takes about 4 minutes. Is that okay? Or do we need to cut it off?
Go ahead.
Okay. All right. I wrote this short story, and it's called Fractured. And since I love to read to my children, you all get a story read to you. The young doctor pulled his medical bag from the horn of the saddle and didn't bother tying up the horse. On the porch of the makeshift hospital, the stout nurse he'd left in charge was pacing, her characteristic glower in full bloom. You said a night or two. It's been a week and she's no better. Won't eat, won't talk. She followed into the cabin and kicked the door shut. Nurse, don't put your foot on my door, he said, and threw off his coat. What happened to your shirt? Dirty cur on the side of the road. I'm fine. You say she won't eat? I make her fresh stew. About the only thing I figure that swollen jaw can handle, but she won't touch it. Won't let me check her neither. The nurse's scowl was heating up the small entry of the remote cabin in the Rocky Mountains. The doctor glanced up the stairs to his assigned quarters and decided against a quick change. Would you mind putting the horse in the barn? The doctor asked the fuming nurse, and pulled on his white lab coat over his sullied shirt. The cold morning air might do her some good. The nurse gave a curt nod and went back outside to yell at the wandering animal. Without hesitation, the doctor stepped to the door he used as an emergency room when patients could not be transported down the river to the bigger hospital, and rapped his knuckles against the wood. May I come in? He called, softly stepping into the candlelit room. The figure in the bed retreated under the hand-sewn quilt his mother insisted he pack for the cold Montana winters. I'm afraid I've heard some unpleasant news. Gossip, really, he said, from the telegraph house where I just picked up my mail. The heap on the bed was a commotion of heartache, muffled by the layers drawn tighter around her. Maybe a story then, the doctor asked, uncertain of how she was faring after the nurse's report. Out peeked the battered face of the young maiden he had seen to just the weeks before. The swelling that had held her eyes shut was gone, and he saw the mysterious gray-hued irises rimmed by purple that the nurse had insisted was witchcraft. The young doctor gave a scant smile and nodded, to which the blankets shook a happy reply. Very well, let's start with, once upon a time, there lived a magical bird covered in black shiny feathers, a beautiful animal with a kind heart and melodious voice. One day, a greedy hunter came along and heard the beautiful bird so happy in its tree. He knocked the bird down and took it home to live in a cage where the hunter could make it sing whenever he pleased. But sometimes the bird didn't feel like singing in its cage. The blankets had birthed the head and shoulders of the thin young lady who held her broken wrist against her chest. The diffused light in the room pushed the shadows under her eyes into her cheeks, and the thin line broke between her swollen lips. Go on then, she managed to say, a hoarse crack in her reply. The young doctor had always been a kindly soul and enjoyed his training in medicine as a way to relieve suffering. But last week, when the broken wife of another man was dropped on the hospital's porch with a note that the husband would come back for her when the bleeding had stopped, something inside the doctor fractured. The baby was lost, the arm was bound, and he was called away on another errand, leaving the capable nurse to watch after the injured woman. The doctor sat down beside the bed. I suppose a bird trapped for so long had forgotten what it was to sing and what the sunshine felt like, or even the breeze blowing through the trees. Then one day when the hunter left the door open, the bird felt the stirring of the wind through the opening and began to warble. Not a beautiful note, but a song no less. And a passing fisherman wading along the river went to discover the sound. To his surprise, the bird's song grew louder as he drew near. The reverent tune turned fervent in its plea to be let out of the cage. And what did the fisherman do? The woman's mysterious eyes studied the doctor's features as she tenderly traced a finger over her swollen face. Several questions passed through her mind before she ultimately asked, what will happen when the hunter comes back? What do you mean? The hunter could track the bird again. Have you heard my story before? She shook her head and leaned back against the pillows, the examination of her swollen features forgotten. I thought not, the doctor began again. And what did that fisherman do? Why, the fisherman set the fire to the cabin and went on his way. The startled maiden bolted upright in the covers. No, he didn't. I see you're more alert than the nurse had let on. Good. The doctor took the cold stew from the nightstand and offered it to the woman, but she returned it to the table. The young doctor nodded and continued, of course, you're right. The young fisherman had let the bird go. His whole purpose in going to the cabin was to make the hunter think the bird had died in the fire. The plump nurse stumped through the front door with someone in tow, their voices filling the smaller cabin with chatter. The doctor leaned forward, his eyes level with his patient, and said, I wonder if that bird knows how much the fisherman enjoyed her singing in the trees. Excuse me, the outspoken nurse said, her ruddy head jutting into the room. But someone's here from the telegraph office for our only patient. Says it's urgent. The man was then hushed into the room. He nodded at the doctor, who passed him to stand by the window to serve the coming morning bright on the horizon. Ma'am, I'm afraid there's been a bit of bad luck. Telegraph says your husband's been found over in the tree line he was working. And well, he's dead. The messenger held up the flimsy paper, the room too dark for anyone to read it. And not to make the news worse, but someone left the stew going on your stove, and your place is burned. Thank you, said the doctor, and pulled the man's sleeve, turning him towards the door. That's enough for now. The nurse will see you out. But we need you to come do an autopsy, the telegraph operator whispered and looked back at the young widow in the bed. You're the only doctor in these parts, and everyone trusts your judgment, Dr. Fisher. So that was the story that I wrote for class. It was an assignment. We were studying Kate Chopin and the twists that come at the end of stories. And that one was just published. So thank you for your generous donations that make me one of the 112, I believe she said, that you guys have helped so far. I want you to know that I actually was accepted into BYU's MFA program for creative writing. So I'll be starting that this fall.
Jamie, thank you so much. We loved hearing from you. Our members know that their money has been well spent. We wish you success of every kind in your future life. I know you've had a very successful life so far. Thank you for sharing this with us.
Hi, my name is Monica English. I am a proud Elder Quest Scholarship recipient. I am a non-traditional student, very non-traditional. I'm 47 years old and I have 12 children, 7 of whom are still at home. And my educational journey started a good long time ago. To give you an idea, when I started going to Utah Valley University, it was Utah Valley Community College, and my associates was awarded by Utah Valley State College. And then I took a nice long break to take care of my family. We have children that were born to us. I also have 2 children adopted from Africa, and then we became foster parents. 4 of those foster kids permanently joined our family as well. So things are busy at my house. When my kids were in school and I had the opportunity to return to Utah Valley University, I worried that I wouldn't be smart enough, that my years of taking care of little children and volunteering at high schools and doing all of those household things would have let the brainy side of me deteriorate. And I'm glad to say that was not the case. When I came back, I found that all of those household things and those 20 years of life experiences gave me the ability to think in a broader sense than a lot of the kids who'd come in at 18 and 19. At this point, have 9 credits left until I received my bachelor's degree. I majored in religious studies and peace and justice studies with a minor in gender studies. I want to tell you about one project that I was involved in that really was meaningful to me and seems to be taking off in some fun directions. And that is early in returning to school, I went on a study abroad to Northern Ireland, the topic being peace and justice studies and conflict resolution in a place that had suffered quite a bit of violent conflict for a lot of years. While I was there, I had the opportunity to speak with a woman who was involved in the Women's Coalition, a political party that was started by women to make sure women's voices were heard in the peace process, and ended up being the only party to bring women to the actual peace talks. That party was so interesting to me. I applied to UVU to be able to receive a grant and return to Northern Ireland to do more study with the Women's Coalition. When I was there for 2 weeks, I was able to interview different women on different sides of the conflict who had come together in this cross-community peace effort for women's voices. I also was looking for archival information and was really disappointed that at the major archives that I went to, there was no information about the Women's Coalition until I wandered into the Linen Library, which is the oldest library in Northern Ireland, and said, do you happen to have anything on the Women's Coalition? And they said, oh yeah, we've got about 32 boxes, but they're not labeled and they're not organized. And do you want to start with box 1? And I said, absolutely. So I spent every waking minute I could in that archive taking pictures of these documents that are just sitting unlooked at, unexamined. I also was asked by UVU after this to be part of their team to go to the United Nations and speak at the Commission on the Status of Women. I spoke about that and another research project I had worked with Dr. Debjani Chakravarti on. That one was an interview project where it has since been published, where we interviewed people who were LGBTQ as well as Mormon, and how they make those intersecting identities come together. So at the United Nations, I was able to present on both of those because they both applied. At this point, I have 9 credits left until I receive my bachelor's. I've taken a break during COVID. As you might expect, it's quite, it's had a real impact on our large family. But I hope that I will be able to go back soon, as COVID seems to be moving, closing down, I hope. ElderQuest has been amazing. What a wonderful organization, and to be able to give me both the scholarship and the confidence that I needed as a non-traditional student who had a real drive. So thank you very much.
I first met the Hughes family a number of years ago when I taught their son, Rob. It soon became apparent that Rob's writing skills far surpassed those of other 4th graders. Obviously, a chip off the old block. My relationship with his very talented family was further cemented when Dean's wife, Kathy, and I became professional colleagues and friends in Provo School District. I've better come to know and appreciate Dean through his books.
Dean Hughes.
And what a fine, prolific writer he is, having published more than 100 books. That's a lot of writing, folks. Probably best known for his World War II series, Children of the Promise,
I am listening.
books I personally devoured. Dean has written for all ages. 2 of his young adult books, Soldier Boys and 442, have received national acclaim. Dean is well credentialed. He grew up in Ogden and graduated with a BA from Weber State University. Then earned an MA in creative writing and a PhD in English literature from the University of Washington. Dean and Kathy have 3 children, 9 grandkids, and a great-grandson. We look forward now, Dean, to learning from you how to age awkwardly.
Am I unmuted?
Go Dean.
Okay, I wasn't sure if I was on yet. Well, you know, I always wanted to grow old graciously, but I just can't seem to do it. I'm finding that I'm growing old rather awkwardly. Some things have started to bug me that, you know, it didn't bother me so much when I was younger. I guess I just didn't notice, but I'm getting kind of grouchy about it. Like, for instance, when they announced that people 65 and older could get the COVID shots, and then they called them the elderly. I said, 65, you just got out of childhood, you know? How can you be called elderly? When I think of someone elderly, I think of someone really feeble, you know, out of touch, you know, little, you know, Boy Scouts helping them across the street. Listen, if a Boy Scout tries to help me across the street, I'll challenge him to a race. And I was fast in high school, and I think I've still got, well, not much of that speed, but I still think I could beat a 12-year-old boy. Why do people think that when you get older, you're cute? Do you notice that? You know, they say, the cute little old man. Well, a guy could be 6'9", and they'd say, what a cute little old man. You know, we're not little, you know, well, some of us are a little smaller than we used to be. Some of us are a little bigger than we used to be. But I don't know where this thing of, oh, they're so precious, they're so cute. They'll have news shows and they'll interview an older person and oh, isn't that sweet what the person just said? Well, see, I'm not precious and I'm not sweet, I'm not cute, and I have no intention in becoming any of those things. I'm starting to drive my wife crazy. Some of you know my wife, Kathy. We watch the news a lot, and it's like a routine. We watch the early news, the late news, national news, and so forth. But have you noticed that news is really more commercials than it is news? But what bugs me are those commercials. They're just starting to drive me crazy. And I complain about them to my wife, which she does not appreciate. But the repetition of it all, I don't ever again want to hear, you gotta come and see us. You know, they've done that for years now. They need to think up something new. Or what about, it's better with Baffetter? But the one that bothers me by far the most, it's been on for years and years, and it never ends. And it's call S&S Roofing. Bunch of people on a roof, call S&S Roofing. I had some shingles blow off our roof. And I thought, oh, we got to get something done. And the first thing that came to my head was call S&S Roofing. And I said, no. I got my revenge. I got online and found someone else, and I didn't call S&S Roofing. There's a new one now. It's lower than low and fresher than fresh. I look at Kathy and I say, what's fresher than fresh? You know, if something's fresh, it's fresh. You can't get fresher than fresh. I mean, green bananas, maybe that's fresher than fresh. I don't know, but I say that to Kathy and she says, Dean, it's just a commercial. You know, don't pay any attention to it. Well, I can't stand it. It just doesn't make any sense to me. So, you know, we've been married 54 years and I hope our marriage is going to last. But these commercials just might drive us apart. Well, I actually do have something more serious to say today. I actually think that that the growing process of growing older is not an easy one, but I do think that we have a perspective that we can give to the world, that we have something that we can offer to our children and their children, but also to the next generation in general. When I think of I think people make a lot of fun of the 40s and 50s and 60s now, but I think it was a glorious time. We have wonderful memories, and I would like for younger people, I'd like my little Ben, my little great grandson who's not yet 2, I want him to understand a little bit about who great grandpa was. I'll be gone before long, and he will only remember a very old man, but I'd like him to remember or to know something about me and about the time I grew up in, so he has that perspective. We can give ourselves to our posterity, and we can give our time. And the way we can do that is to write our life histories. Now, I know that many of you have probably already done that, and others are saying, yeah, I know, I should do that. Well, I've just started. I've finally gotten around to it. I've just started. But I want to do more than just, give a bunch of generalities. Oh, I had a wonderful childhood, it was idyllic, and that sort of thing. That doesn't pass me and my time along to my my children, grandchildren, and further descendants. And so what I want to do is try to write something that is actually, for one thing, honest about my life. And I think we can do that. I don't think we have to be afraid to do that. I've read a lot of life histories. When I do research for historical novels, I read the published histories. I read all the the research of all different kinds that I can do. But one of the things I get to sooner or later are journals and life histories that people wrote in previous decades, even previous centuries. Some of them are almost useless to me as a creative writer. I don't learn anything about that time. And those are usually the ones that are quite general, maybe kind of preachy, just sort of an overview. The really good life histories are detailed, and there's an attempt to get to the heart of who a person has been and what his or her life has been like. One of the best ways to do that is to tell stories, to tell anecdotes or longer accounts of events from your life. I love that when I'm reading a life history, because often a story is one particular experience that someone had that represents perhaps a lot of others, but it isn't just this overview, it's this detailed moment in a person's life. And so if you are writing a life history or plan to, or want to expand what you've already done, think about that. Go back to the stories that you have in your life. Now, there's a problem with stories. Family stories have a way of growing, don't they? It's like that fishing trip you took when you caught this nice fish that kept getting bigger as the years go by. I play golf with a guy who says, he'll say, boy, I was really a good golfer when I was younger. And in fact, the older I get, the better I was. And that's kind of true, isn't it? And so we have to be careful about our stories. After a while, the story is the reality, and the reality gets lost somewhere. And so I think it's important to try to go back and get your head around that actual experience and try to record it as best you can. And by the way, when I say record, I think some people don't like to write. And so one of the very good ways to do this is to do recordings in your own voice that you can pass along. When I started my life history, I thought I wanted, maybe a lot of people are only going to read the first chapter, and maybe a lot of people aren't going to be interested to follow through. So I thought, okay, I want to hit the first chapter with, these are the truly amazing things that have happened in my life. And I think we do all have amazing things that happen in our lives. And things that a lot of times you wouldn't expect. I was a roller skating champion when I was a young man. I'm serious. I was well, not quite a national champion, but my partner and I took 4th place at nationals in junior division in dance skating. Now, you've all watched the Olympics, you know dance skating, but you don't think it's done on roller skates. You think it's only done on ice skates. But back in the day, it was done on roller skates too. There used to be lots of roller skating rinks back in the day, and many of those have disappeared now. But my partner and I, we took the Northwestern States Championship 2 years in a row, and we skated for the national championship 1 year and got 4th place. We were 14 years old, and now my partner is not alive anymore as of last year. It's a long time ago, but what a memory that is, because we devoted a lot of time and effort to it. We practiced a great deal. I want my little Ben, my little great-grandson, to say, great-grandpa was a roller skater? I mean, he's got a new image now. I mean, roller skaters now, that's a whole new image now. But I want him to know we did dance skating, and we did it well. I had a lot of jobs when I was young. I worked on construction a lot through high school and college, and got into various kinds of construction. But at one point, I had the worst job any human being has ever had. Now, you can make your claims, but I'm telling you, this is the worst job that exists. I was the guy who worked on a rock crusher, and with a shovel, I had to work my way around the rock crusher and dig out the sand that fell out. Now, this is in the heat of summer, and as the big rocks are crushed into little rocks, they produce not only gravel but sand, and it falls down to these screens. And if it builds up, it's going to stop the operation. So someone has to dig that out from under. And I would start, and I would work all the way around and come back, and then maybe take like a minute or two, and then start all the way around again. The noise was unbelievable from all those rocks being hammered. And so we wore earplugs, or I wore earplugs. I was the only guy who did this job. And it was 8 hours of doing that. And the dust that was in the air. So I had to wear goggles and I had to wear a mask long before COVID. I learned how to wear a mask. Well, it was great preparation for becoming an English professor. In a certain way it is. The things we do in life, all those things that we experience, for one thing, a job like that really keeps you in college. And you say, I know I don't want to do this all my life. And so I want my posterity to know that I did some miserable jobs and I stuck with them. I put in my 8 hours and we had to get up really early. It was up in Weber Canyon. I lived in Ogden. And so it was, I don't know, maybe a better part of an hour to drive up there by Croydon, up where Devil's Slide is. And we started at 6 to avoid the heat. And that meant I had to get up by like 4:30 to be ready to go up there. And I did that day in and day out. Probably it was a few weeks, but when I look back on it now, it seems like it was half my childhood. Well, I was older than a child. When I was in grad school in Seattle, I worked as a bellboy in a hotel in downtown Seattle. Worked there 4.5 years. I started out doing only night shifts and then worked in the summers there and then worked like usually 2 or 3 shifts a week while I was in grad school. It was hard, but we didn't have much money and it helped a lot. It was actually pretty good money, by the way, and it was a very interesting job. That experience prepared me a lot to be a writer. I had grown up in Utah, and the only place I'd ever been besides Utah was on an LDS mission in Germany, and boy, was this a new experience. I saw a world that I hadn't known. Well, amazing. I mean, I could list off, I've now written something like, I don't know, 15 pages of amazing things that happened to me in my youth. And so I think that's one thing to look for. Ask yourself, what's been distinctive about my life? What is something I could tell that would surprise another generation and would perhaps also give some insight into who I am? So I think you're getting the idea that you don't say, one summer I worked on construction. You talk about the kind of construction and what you did. I'll give you an example. I worked on road construction, also up in Weber Canyon. And we were digging post holes for a barrier fence between the lanes of the freeway up there. And the ground was so rocky that a backhoe wouldn't get down through that rock. And so they would dig as much as they could, and then we would come along with a shovel and we would dig out, and often that meant enlarging the hole enough to get the rocks out. And when you finished a hole, you moved to the front of the line, you started another hole. It was a whole lot like being in prison somewhere and on a gang. Once again, this was the summer before I got married. When I got married, I weighed 160 pounds after putting in that summer. It was hard. It was really hard. But I have an anecdote that I like to tell from that time. We had this boss who was, if I tell the story in my book, I'm going to have to go into it a little bit to explain more about him. But let's just say he was sort of challenged. And he never wore a watch. And maybe he did that on purpose, I don't know. But when it would come time for lunch, one of us would say, oh, it's time for lunch. But we would say it about 15 minutes before it really was time. The old wheel inn that used to be up there, we'd go over there and we'd buy something to drink. We'd take our lunch pails, we'd eat. But then we kind of extended the end for about 15 minutes. Now, to this day, I really believe he knew darn well what was going on, but he wanted an hour off for lunch too. Well, here's the interesting thing about that. Now, if I tell that story, do I want to admit that I was one of the guys who gave him a false read on what time it was. I mean, it was dishonest. Do I want to admit that? Well, I've repented for it. Honest, I have. But yeah, I think I want to tell that. I think I want my posterity to know that I was a young guy once and I did things that maybe aren't entirely things to be proud of. I recently listened to a recording of my my grandmother that I did an interview with her. She was in her 90s, and this was quite a few years ago. And so I interviewed her and taped that. And I came across that tape and got it digitized and then listened to it just the other day. And she was talking about growing up, or not growing up, but her early married days in Idaho. And I said, so tell me about your childhood. And Grandma said, I had a very happy childhood. We had a wonderful family. Now, is that what you want to write in your life history? It's good. It's good. We all remember our happy times, but in a good life history, you do more than that. And so I said, tell me something that you remember that you especially is a fond memory for you. And she said, well, my brothers and my dad would grub sagebrush as they were opening new land. And then they would pile it up in a huge pile and light it on fire. And so we would have these big bonfires, and I loved that. It was so much fun. And then she said, then as it burned down, we would throw potatoes into the coals, and we would eat those potatoes, and they tasted so good. Now that to me that takes me to another time and another age that I have no experience with. But that is such a meaningful thing for me, just have that one image of her. How many of our kids would say a baked potato was really a great treat? And a bonfire of sagebrush, well, no, they'd rather go see Stadium of Fire or something, I mean, I don't think we're as easily impressed, but that was an insight into my grandmother. She had a brother die, and she had a little sister who was 1.5 years old when she died. And I think sometimes we get the idea that, oh, well, back in those days, kids died a lot. They must have gotten used to it. But Grandma in her 90s, as she talked about her brother and her little sister, got tears in her eyes, just remembering how brokenhearted she was about those two deaths. That really gave me an insight. So that's the kind of thing I think we're trying to do as we try to create our life histories, that we provide that direct experience that we've had. I know it's hard to get those details back sometimes, but we have to try to remember as best we can. And one of the things we can do is a little research. There are times when there's something we don't know, but you can check it out. You don't have to know all the dates, but if you were trying to think, well, what year was that? A lot of times, if you've kept a good journal, which I haven't, then you've got that. But a lot of times there are cross references you can find, and you can try to find the detail you need. I think one of the things I want to do is, after I get more of this written, I want to give it to my grandchildren are young adults now. They're not little kids. But I think if I let them read some of it, I can get some feedback as to what's interesting and what's worth keeping and what isn't. When I'm trying to write a historical novel, I often find that there are things I just don't know. For instance, let's say there's a family in the 19th century and the family owns a cow. I've never owned a cow. I grew up in the big city of Ogden, and some of my relatives lived up in Malad, Idaho. And so I would go up there, and I tried to milk a cow a couple of times. And that's about my experience with cows. So if you have a cow, what do you do with all that milk? Oh, and how do you make it into butter or cheese? I didn't know, but I've written about in the 19th century, and I've written about people who own cows. And so if you go online, you can learn a great deal about that sort of thing, about plowing and you know, the gear on a workhorse, and you know, all of those things you can learn. But the great thing about life history, if you can put the things in that you have to try to think, what are the things that future generations won't know much about? How can I give some of that to them so that they'll know how grandma or grandpa felt about those particular things, or what they, you know, what was the detail? It takes a lot of work to have milk every day and separate it and churn it and make butter. And you know, we don't have to worry about that in most of our families now, but it was the life at that time was so different from ours because so many of those chores had to be done from scratch. The first time I went on a date with Kathy, we drove up to a restaurant in Ogden Canyon called the Great Cliff Lodge. And it looked down on Ogden River, very lovely spot. And Kathy was wearing a green dress, not Kelly green, not dark green. It was like an emerald green. And Kathy has hazel eyes, and the green in those eyes really came out with that green dress on. And she has dimples, wonderful dimples. She was so beautiful. I could not take my eyes off her. My little heart was just pounding the whole evening. Well, after dinner, we drove on up Ogden Canyon, past Pineview Reservoir and up into South Fork. And we got out of the car, and I told her it was to look at the stars. And we did. We stood outside the car and we looked at the stars. And when I kissed her, I'll never forget that her lower lip was more full and round than I expected. Now that would imply that I knew something about lips and kissing, but I'm not going to admit to that. But I always remember that that's what that was my first impression that night. Well, it wasn't really our first date. It was our first date, just the two of us. So it was a second date, you know. But do I want to tell my grandkids that we kissed on the first date? I don't want them to kiss on the first date. But I think I'm going to tell them because I want them to know how much in love I was with Kathy right from the beginning. And that after 54 years of marriage, I haven't forgotten that feeling, but certain aspects of marriage deepen that love and certain aspects test it to the limit. And that's okay. And that's okay to say too. I will add, there's another little dimension to that story. And that is that when we were driving up towards South Fork, she leaned over and kissed me on the cheek. I don't remember exactly why, what I said or did to, or why, if she said something when she did that, but it was very clear to me that that was a signal. If she was ready to give me a little kiss on the cheek first, then to me that meant that it was okay to kiss her. Well, I really want to put that part in the story too. Kathy denies it entirely now. I think if you ask her, she'd say, Dean, I was wearing a blue dress that night. What are you talking about, you know? But that's okay. She'll write her version and I'll write mine. I don't know whether she'll put that night in or not. But I think that's what you have to do. You have to rely on the memory you have. Now, there's another interesting aspect to this. If you're a young person now and you say, we were driving in our car and she leaned over and kissed me on the cheek, how would you do that in cars now? You got to lean from the bucket seat on the right. I mean, so see, I'm going to have to explain that there used to be cars that had seats that went all the way across in the front. And it was kind of the thing for the girl to sit kind of close to her boyfriend or the guy she was out with. Well, if on that second date, she was already willing to sit pretty close to me and kiss me on the cheek, I think she kind of liked me that night too. There's another thing. As I tried to write that, I thought, what shade of green was that dress she wore? And a minute ago, I said, it wasn't Kelly green, you know? Well, so I Googled shades of green. And I went on and I looked at all the different little pictures and all thumbnails of different colors of green until I said, I think that's about right. And that's why I called it emerald green now and in my book when I'm writing. So those are the things that you sometimes have to do your own research, and you sometimes have to guess that kids in the future won't know this, so I need to explain it. Oh, and one other thing, I couldn't remember the name of Graycliff when I tried to write it. And so once again, I had to check it out, and I did a little, I don't remember what I entered, but I found out it's still there. The Graycliff Lodge is still there. And I want to take my wife there one of these times and remember that all over again. There are also major events in our lives that change who we are forever. And it's one thing to say, well, in such and such year, I had cancer, had an operation, and it was okay. I survived and I'm all right now. That's true. When I was 60 or 61, I had cancer, and I don't have cancer anymore. Now that's simple. But you know what? After the surgery, there were those 5 years when I had to go back in. At first it was every 6 months and then every year just to check again. And those years of thinking, I'm in my early 60s and this cancer could come back. And am I ready for that? Am I satisfied with my life? Are there other things I would like to do? Do I want to change my life in some ways? That was a very important experience for me. And so if I were to tell that story, I would want to go into it and not just pass over it lightly, even though in a way, it turned out to be pretty simple. I had the surgery and it didn't come back. I think I made some mistakes as a father. I think in raising children, it's a lot easier when you're older and you can look back and think, this is how it ought to be done. But I think I made some mistakes. And all those things have an effect on the whole family and on those kids forever. And some of them I wish I could go back and take back. I wish I could do certain things just a little differently, but I can't. But I want to put that in my life history, that what some of my regrets are. When I was a teenager, I was really cool. I know that doesn't surprise you. If you were cool, you wore button-down collar shirts, just like I'm wearing here. And you wore khakis and penny loafers with white socks and 3-button suits when you finally got a suit. I mean, I had all that stuff. And when I walked down the hallway at school, I knew that I was cool. And I want my little Ben, who's only going to know me as an old man, to know that when I was a kid, I was cool. I'm sure he won't think I'm cool now. But once again, I can go into that story a little bit more. I couldn't afford Gant shirts and Corbin slacks. They were really cool, but they were really expensive. And I had to work for my own school clothes each summer. And I started doing that at quite a young age. I grew up on the west side of Ogden, not on the wrong side of the tracks, but awfully close to the tracks. And we didn't have much. And I took a lot of pride in working enough, whether it was picking cherries or a lot of different things I did in those days, to earn enough money to buy my own school clothes. And so I could not buy the really expensive clothes that a lot of the Ogden High kids wore. And but I could wear what were the kind of the replicas of those that you could buy at stores that weren't quite so expensive. The red carpet shop at Bueller and Bingham's was great, but I couldn't afford to shop there. And so it was the other stores that I went to. See, I want my great grandson to know that too. But yeah, I thought I was cool, whether it was or not. But I also learned some things by having to buy my own clothes. Not only did we live in the wrong part of town, and most of my friends lived in the right part of town, so that was difficult. But my dad had alcohol problems, and he smoked. And it was embarrassing for me to bring my friends into my house. It was a very small house. Well, I think that's had an effect on me all my life, that I wanted to be somebody, that I wanted to not have to be embarrassed to have some people invited into my home, that sort of thing. Well, there are good and bad parts to that, because some of those things are affect you in good ways and some in bad ways. And that's one of the kinds of things I want to talk about. If you think about the novels you love most, you love characters when you get beyond the 1 or 2 dimensional level and you start to feel a sense of knowing that character in that character's complexity. Because we're all complex. We all have baggage. We all have a past of some sort that affects us in various ways. And so I think in our family histories, it's really important to show that complexity, to admit to vanities and jealousies and mistakes you've made and people that you hurt once or twice and now you regret. Those kinds of things, you may think, well, I don't want to put all that in there. But I think if we really want to create a book that will mean something to maybe not only our children, but future generations, then we include those things as well. My life has turned out better than I ever could have dreamed. I've had more wonderful things happen to me than I just didn't imagine what the possibilities were. And so I'm really, really thankful for that. And I want to express that too. And so along with the complexities, I also want to express the kind of the vision I developed as a young person about what I wanted to do and what it took to get there, and then how many of those things exceeded my hopes. Well, I started out by saying that you know, I'm growing old awkwardly. I hear people say age is just a number. Well, that sounds good. And if you're 50, you can say that. But by the time you're 77, as I am, some things are starting to go. And I've had a number of surgeries. I've had a hip replaced and I've had 2 back surgeries. And last year, one of my sons has what he calls his chuck it list. things that he thought he wanted to do really badly, but he's finally decided, you know what, I don't need to do that. Well, I've chucked a few things the last few years. I went skiing with my older son last winter, and when they had to bring me down off the mountain on a snowmobile, I said to my son, let's go to lunch. And then I said, I just quit skiing. And he said, for the day? I said, forever. Do you want my skis? Well, I can't, after 2 back surgeries and a hip replacement, I can't ski anymore. I finally gave it up. So there are things that are happening to me that are more than a number. Nonetheless, here's a way to think about old age that I think it helps me, and I think it's something we can all use. Old age is 5 years older than I am. And it's a rolling number. So right now, old age is at 82. It starts at 82. But when I get to be 82, the nice thing is it will be 87. To some degree, that sort of works. You just say to yourself, I'm not old yet. I'm going to be old, I know. But okay, I'm a little bit forgetful, but not that bad. Don't overdo that, talk of how dumb I've gotten. Just kind of rely on the fact that I'm doing okay. And for at least another 5 years. And there's another trick, and it's the one you all know. The best way to keep from growing old is to keep learning. Elder Quest. There's nothing like learning to keep our minds and our spirits alive, to keep us progressing and feeling like we haven't given up on life. And there's so many ways to do that now. There's so many things that, that are available that weren't available when we were young. When you think, I've been mentioning Google, and you look so many things up, but also just the podcasts and the instructive kinds of YouTube videos you can watch, and all kinds of books in all kinds of formats. If your eyes make it difficult to read for long periods of time, there's so many audio books and so forth that we have available to us now. And so as long as we're continuing to learn, we're not yet old. It's still at least 5 years off. There's one last thing I want to say. I said earlier that I think that time when we grew up was really a glorious time. I'd take the Kingston Trio over any of the music groups now. And we still like to listen to Frank Sinatra, and there's so many things that we associate with those times when we were growing up. But there were some bad things going on when we grew up too. For one thing, racial prejudice was rampant. My dad used the word that we don't say anymore as his word. And my mother would say, Emery, don't say that. Say colored. And so I learned to say colored, and I thought I was really open-minded and kind. We lived very close to a Black neighborhood in Ogden, and I had lots of Black friends. At least that's what I said they were. We played football together, so we were friends. But we didn't do anything together. We didn't, it just wasn't done. I didn't say, hey, why don't you get a date and we'll go out on a date together this weekend with those friends. My dad was so prejudiced against Asians, and he called them all by the same name, a name that goes back to World War II. It didn't matter what country they were from. That was part of my growing up and part of what I've had to shed in my life. And you always wonder, have I shed it entirely? How much of that has stuck with me? I want to talk about that in my life history, what I've experienced with that as I've gone along. I have a grandson who served an LDS mission, I should say a Latter-day Saint mission in Toronto. And he met a beautiful young woman there who was also a missionary. And after they got home from their missions, they ran into each other in a temple one day and started to talk. And he soon asked her out, and eventually they got married. She is a remarkable, beautiful young woman. She has this great heritage. Her grandfather was the first LDS stake president in Taiwan. Or in other words, this California girl is also Chinese. First generation, I mean, her parents are Chinese, and they grew up in Taiwan and moved to California. She's a brilliant young woman. We are so excited about her. But what that means is my European family, all of our lines going back to Wales or England or various parts of Europe, has joined with an Asian family now named Sheng. And they're just great people. And when I hear about Asian hatred, I think of my little great-grandson. And it just makes me sick to think that anyone would ever mistreat him because he's half Chinese. Somehow, someday, we've got to get past this entirely. And so, yeah, we can talk about how great our time was when we were growing up, but I think we also have to admit that there were things that needed to change. Well, learning is the fountain of youth. It's not exactly a silver bullet, but it comes very close to it. And I think that's what we can do, is we can all continue to do things like this, all continue to learn, and just rely on the fact that we're not going to be old for at least another 5 years. Thank you. Now, you said that they could ask questions if they'd like to. I see a hand up there.
Go ahead, Marilyn.
I lived up in Ogden for 30 years.
Is that right?
Great Cliff Lodge was a really special place,
Yeah.
the restaurant up there. I only got there one time and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I only got there one time too. It was kind of expensive.
Yes.
I was trying to impress my Kathy that night.
I'm sure. She probably knew that it was special.
Yeah, I think so.
So you made a big hit that way.
Kathy went to Weber High School and I went to Ogden High School. And
Yeah.
she came down to BYU for 1 year and then came back. And then we ended up in an 8 o'clock English class together. We were both English majors. And that's where we first got interested in each other every morning. In those days, it was a quarter system. And so the 5-hour classes would meet every day. So every morning I would see Kathy.
I have a question.
Okay.
I'm Claire Peterson. I would like very much to know, how much did you earn at that worst job you ever had?
Let's see. It was over $2 an hour because this I was a member of the Laborers and Hod Carriers Union, and so it was a union job, and I think it was around $2.50 an hour. So it was a high-paying job.
I have loved every syllable you've uttered. I am a giant believer in detail. In fact, it's my middle word, my middle name. So thank you for sharing all these great details with us. It was just great.
there is such a thing as going too far with detail and dragging out a story, and you do have to be careful with that, because there comes some point where maybe your reader says, okay, I got the idea here, you know. But I like to, here's an example I like to use. If I say to you, when you were growing up, did you have a tree in your backyard? You say, yeah, we had a tree in our backyard. Then I like to say, oh, well, what's a tree? Because when you think about it, a quaking aspen and a blue spruce are both trees, and they sure don't look very much alike. And you can throw in a mulberry and, you know, so many strange looking trees. I mean, there's something like 150 varieties of oak. And so I love to learn the names of things. And I know the difference between a post oak and a bur oak and so forth. And one time I knew a lot more than I know now, because I got into it at one time. And when Kathy and I served a mission in Nauvoo, and they've planted virtually every kind of tree that will grow there. People don't realize that the Nauvoo historical area is almost an arboretum. And so I got interested in being able to identify all those trees, and the guy who had planted them helped me, and I had a book on trees. And so I love to know the names of things. Now, in my backyard, there was a box elder tree, and one time I fell out of it. Now, if I told the story of falling out of a tree, I think it's better if I say I fell out of the box elder tree in our backyard. Now, little Ben, you know, he may not know when he finally reads this what a box elder tree is, but he can find out. But also, he knows that I knew. And I think that's a principle of creative writing, that you use accurate names for things because it makes it real, which is what we're trying to do, write something that will feel and is real to our readers.
Terry Ann, you raised your hand first.
No, I think Linda did.
Mm.
Linda, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, I have a question for our author. I read your book, Muddy, and I had a hard time with that polygamy story. And I want to know if you had a hard time with that when you wrote it.
Sure. I mean, it's a tough thing. I think one of the things about Latter-day Saints is that a lot of times we'd just rather sort of forget that polygamy ever existed. And you'll notice there hasn't been too much written about it. And it was almost a taboo for a long time. There were, especially with Deseret Book or a company like that. Well, I got interested in the Muddy River Valley because I had a relative who was there on that mission. And so I wanted to write about that. But as I started studying it, I realized that a lot of the people who were there lived in plural marriage. And so if I wanted to write about the Muddy River mission, I had to take on what it was like to enter into plural marriage. And so I talked to Laurel Christensen Day, who's in charge of marketing and kind of the head editor at Deseret Book. And I said, what if I wrote a book about the Muddy River mission, but what if I tell about polygamy and what it might, you know, one version of what it's like. You can't tell every story, but you'll notice one thing I did is I portrayed one couple who entered into polygamy without thinking they ever would, but around them were others. And some of them were pretty lousy marriages and some of them were strong ones. And that, just as our marriages now, some are much stronger than others, that's true of plural marriages, that some people made it work and it worked pretty well, and other people, Brigham Young actually made it available for any woman who was in polygamy to get a divorce if she wanted one. All she had to do was ask for it, except that she had to pay $10. And he put the $10 in the Perpetual Emigration Fund. So there were women who really hated it and wanted out. But one of the things I noticed is that most of the women who lived it thought that it was the hardest thing they ever did. It was just terrible things she had to give. A lot of men felt the same way. And yet there was almost always this religious devotion they expressed, that they were doing what they were called upon to do. And so therefore they did their best to make it work. So it is hard. It's a hard thing to talk about, hard thing to write about. But I tried, what Laurel said to me was, if you could make me feel a little better about polygamy. She's a younger woman and she says, polygamy has just always really troubled me. She said, if you could help me feel a little better about it, then I would feel, I would welcome you to write about it. And when I was finished, she said it did, that it helped her. So, but it's hard, it is hard. Terry?
Thank you, Dean. I served with you on the library board.
Oh,
Long
yeah,
time
yeah.
ago, Terry and Harvard.
Yeah, yeah.
I know you started out writing children's books, and my kids have enjoyed a lot of your books. Can you tell me how that happened, how you ended up doing that?
Well, you know, the first thing that happened was when I was in college at Weber State, I took a lit class that I thought sounded really fun. It was children's lit. And it was just, you know, it wasn't required for my major. I just thought it'd be an interesting thing to do. And I was kind of thinking about writing for children, but I hadn't, you know, pushed the matter. So when I did my master's in creative writing, and then my first job teaching was in Missouri, and I was right close to all the historical sites out there. And I got interested, and I thought I would like to write about Jackson County, Missouri, and independence and so forth, but do it from a child's point of view. So I did those books, and at the same time, I submitted a book in the New York market that was an entirely different kind of book. It was actually about baseball, and I ended up selling books in both markets, the national market and the LDS market. And keep saying LDS, I should say Latter-day Saint. So that's what I did. And that's what I thought I was. It was a writer of children's books. And so I wrote children's and young adults, and I did that for 20 years at least. And but I got an idea to write about the 1940s and World War II. But the books that I had in mind didn't look like children's books to me. And so I took that idea to Sherry Dew, and she said, you're not going to believe this, but yesterday our salesman came in and said, what we really need right now is, because Working with Glory was selling like crazy. He says, and it was not with Deseret Book at that time because it was still with Bookcraft. And he said, we need a book, historical novel with a Latter-day Saint, you know, characters set in World War II. And that's what I was pitching to Sherry. And so I ended up doing those. And then that kind of moved me into writing more for adults and mostly historical novels. I still sometimes do a young adult novel. Can I show them that book today? I've fairly recently published a book called Displaced that takes place in Beirut, Lebanon, where Kathy and I served a mission. And it's about the street kids in Beirut they were Syrian refugees, and they would beg in the streets or sell little trinkets and things. And we got to know one boy who always came to our car when we stopped on the corner and sold us chiclet gum. So so I did that book, and I've done some World War II books for young adults in recent years too. So right now I'm doing historical novels, and I haven't done like a middle grade book for a long time. But I have still done what they call young adult, which is kind of more teenage books. Yeah.
Do you limit your vocabulary when you write for children?
You know, I don't think too much about it. Yeah, inevitably you do somewhat, but I don't worry about it. I don't try to think, here's a word list for this grade or something like that. More often than not, you can say, well, if kids don't know that word, it'd sure be a good word for them to learn, you know. Good to see you, Terry. Thanks. This has been fun to be here. I looked up at the wall and I thought, wait a minute, there's not a single elderly person up there. Thank you.
As I was visiting with him before we started, he said, I'm a writer, I'm not a speaker, but let's all give him another round of applause. He's definitely an entertaining speaker. Okay, I want to introduce Mark Child. He's originally from Kaysville, but he and his wife, sweetheart Deb, have lived in Provo for the last 30 years where they've raised their 4 children. He graduated from the U of U and with a degree in music education. Upon education, he took his young family to Manhattan School of Music there in New York City and worked on a master's in as an opera singer performance. Upon returning to Utah, Mark became a principal baritone with the Utah Opera, performing major roles and minor roles on the main stage and performing in operas in school performances program, which was taken all over the state for the young people around. For several years, Mark sang with the Pro Musica, a Salt Lake-based professional Bach choir, and also served as an associate director. While still at the U, and I love the way he wrote this, Mark, to the chagrin of his voice teacher, he became a backup singer for the Donnie and Marie show. That gave him an opportunity to work with other artists like that, such as Lex de Oliveto and Michael McLean, Merrill Jensen, Janice Capperry, and many others. Mark also enjoys performing, conducting, and teaching, and has been a private instructor for over 25 years. He has soloed with Utah Symphony, Utah Opera, Pro Musica, Intimate Opera, the choir at Temple Square, and more funerals than he cares to count. Mark became a member of the Tabernacle Choir in 1996 and has had the wonderful opportunity to solo with choirs on Sunday morning broadcasts and also with many recordings. Mark recently retired from his day job he put in quotes, as a sales and marketing vice president in the educational technological industry, where he worked with K through 12 school administrators across the US and Canada. And then he ends it with this: Mark has had many rewarding musical experiences throughout his life, but he counts the most fulfilling as those when he leads his own ward choir and when he sings with his family around the piano. Mark Child.
Cheryl wanted me to kind of give you a little background about this particular piece that I'm singing. It's called Pastoral. She mentioned, I had written the introduction that she read, but I mentioned in that introduction that when I was in college, I sang as a backup singer on the Donnie and Marie show, and then went to New York to study opera. When we returned to Utah, because of my studio singing as a backup singer on the Donnie and Marie show, I made a lot of contacts and people that like to use me as a backup singer. And so I ended up doing a lot of studio work. One of the wonderful associations I had was with a woman from Los Angeles. Her name is Linda Worsley. And she was a composer and arranger and did a lot of work for Sony Records. And one day, several years ago, she called me on the phone and she said, Mark, I've got this song in my head that I'm composing and I hear you singing it. I want you to record it for me. And it's the 23rd Psalm. And it has truly become one of my all-time favorites and the song that I love to sing. And it has special meaning especially at Easter time. And so grateful for Linda for allowing me to sing this song, Pastoral. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever and ever.
I'm so short. I have to rush and get that so that I can actually be seen. Mark, thank you so much. That was truly inspiring and a beautiful, beautiful song. Thank you for sharing that with us. We really appreciate it. Our last student speaker is Elijah Aubry, and I am so grateful to him. I'm grateful to all three speakers, but Elijah actually is here in person, and I think that's absolutely wonderful. We're thrilled to have him here. He was a scholarship recipient in the 2018-2019 school year, and we're excited to hear from him. Elijah.
It is so wonderful to be here. I hope that musical number was as wonderful to you as it was in person. I truly believe that I was born in the wrong generation. My 4-year-old son knows how to work my smartphone better than I do. I enjoy reading poetry instead of Facebook posts. So I feel like being here today is a wonderful experience. And I also wish that we could all be gathered together. But fortunately, we have technology and we still have the chance to speak and be heard and to listen and to grow and to learn. I love what Mr. Dean Hughes said. I think we all have trials that we go through. We all have our cross to bear. And mine is a little different than others. I grew up in a family with 10 siblings. My parents got divorced when I was younger. I was raised by a single mother who worked several jobs to provide for us in the best way that she could. And as a child, I thought that education would never be a possibility. Fortunately, I was able to go to Utah Valley University. I was able to marry my wife, whose name is Caitlin, and we had 3 sons really quickly. This is a photo of my wife and I. Within a year of being married, we welcomed our first son. About a year afterwards, we welcomed our second son, and about 14 months after that, we welcomed our third son. I was still an undergraduate student at the time, and money was tight, and stresses were high, and we were worried that I had to leave school so that I could help provide more than I was doing at the time. And I remember I was in the Fulton Library at Utah Valley University, and I received an email from the Elder Quest Scholarship Fund. I was accepted to receive a scholarship, and that amount of money was going to provide me with my last year of school. Following graduation, I accepted a job teaching seminary for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I am actually starting my master's in June. I'm so grateful for this scholarship program. I was so happy to be asked to come back and to share my story. We recently welcomed a beautiful daughter into our lives. And I am so happy to teach my kids that education is valuable, it is important, and it is necessary. So I appreciate all your donations. I appreciate your willingness to help this rising generation receive the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to be wonderful members and to contribute to this community. Thank you.
I stand on my tiptoes. Thank you, Elijah. We do appreciate you coming. I know you can't see me, just the top of my head, but that's the hair, so there you go. Most people recognize me by my hair, so I guess as long as you're seeing it, you're okay. Thank you, Elijah. That was absolutely wonderful. This has been such a glorious seminar. And for any of our members that missed it, they really, really missed a treat. This has been wonderful, and I can't thank Gerhard enough, Margene, our president, Cheryl, vice president, Ruth, all of the people that work so very, very hard to do this. To the 3 speakers that came, for the students, my thanks goes out to them. My thanks goes out to my committee. My committee works so hard to bring these students to you, but not only that, to choose the students to receive the money. The committee consists of Terry Ann Harwood, who is the vice chairperson, Dave Johnson, Kent Larkin, and Bonnie Harmon. And the 5 of us will be meeting later this month to start again with more of the resumes of these students to go through and to pick your winners for next year. And how much money you donate, of course, will determine how many students we can scholarship. This past year, each scholarship that we gave, and we gave 6 of them, was $3,238. This was a total of $19,428. This was an increase over the year before of $376. And we expect there to be another increase for this tuition for next year. It never goes down, people. It only goes up. But I am so grateful to you because you have been so generous to you. I'm so grateful to my committee. When I handed them 267 resumes to go through to pick 12, they did it. They didn't even complain. They gasped, but they didn't complain. So I'm grateful to them for the hours and hours that they spend reading and judging. Be generous. Please be generous. These students need you. They need me. They need us all make someone's life better, really, because you care. And if we've heard stories today about people needing help and about people caring, we just heard them, including the Kims. Thank you so, so much.
I just want to end with the word I started with was gratitude. I hope you've learned some things this year. I'll never think about World War I in the same way I did before after having the class. You find temple imagery in everything we do. C.S. Lewis reminds us that sweet desires are feelings of joy in our lives. The love of learning, the love of reading, and just one more reference. This was from Macaulay. Make the love of learning the center of your life. And of course, Dean Hughes said that in a little bit different words, but the same thing was issued. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, wonderful people who tuned in every day for a whole year. Thank you, board, for supporting me and for all that you did. Thank Gerhardt. We couldn't even have functioned this year without Gerhardt. And Margene, and just thank everybody for all you have done and all those people who participated today and staying with us. Again, my cup runneth over, and I want to end with the word, I'm so grateful. Keep gratitude in your life. Thank you.